It seems like the final ship for Ricciardo has set sail, as Hulkenberg took the last vacant seat in HAAS. Although Ricciardo never showed much interest in this seat, HAAS was also to blame for not paying enough attention to Ricciardo and instead securing an 8-time race winner to replace Mick. But now that Ricciardo won't be on the grid in 2023, what is next for the Honey Badger? Is there a scenario in which he returns stronger than ever? After one of the worst 2 years of Ricciardo's career, he is finally away from McLaren. It's safe to say that he was at the wrong place at the wrong time, as the Honey Badger just wasn't able to understand how the McLaren works. On top of that, the 2022 regulations made the car even slower and harder to understand, which is something Norris and James Key, the technical director of the team, have put a huge emphasis on throughout the season. Therefore, the results were depressing enough on their own, and McLaren decided that they didn't have to wait any longer and bought out Ricciardo's contract, only to replace him with a younger and much more promising compatriot, Oscar Piastri, an F3 and F2 winner. So what does the future hold now for Ricciardo? It seems like the only thing he can do in 2023 if he wants to remain in the sport is sign on as a reserve driver for a top-performing team. Although many thought he'd be Mercedes-bound due to the fact that the Brackley-based team lost 2 reserve drivers in the previous period, it seems like Ricciardo would want to work out a reserve driver deal with Red Bull. After all, with how things stand with Perez, Ricciardo could hope that the Mexican will feel that enough is enough and will decide to leave the team, which will open up a vacant spot for the Aussie in the near future. As of now, this is a massive speculation, but one thing is for sure. Ricciardo wants to stay in Formula One for as long as he can. This means that he doesn't want to try out other competitions, such as NASCAR or the Indy 500, as he mentioned that his future is in Formula One, and he wants to come back stronger than ever. Although his ambitions and reality of returning in 2024 are likely to be the same as Ricciardo's, when it comes to selecting a proper team, Ricciardo is playing the hope card that a seat will be available in some of the top-performing teams. But why did Ricciardo pass up the chance to drive in HAAS? This was almost a guaranteed seat for him, and the fact that he didn't even bother to talk to them just goes to show how much he doesn't want to drive in F1 just for the sake of it. After all, Ricciardo wasn't that much better than Magnussen throughout the season, as he is only 1 position ahead of the Dane in the Drivers' Championship. To be honest, he did frequently battle HAAS throughout the 2022 season, so it wouldn't have been a downgrade for him in the end. Steiner spoke about reaching out to Ricciardo prior to the Piastri announcement at McLaren, as he added, "In the beginning I reached out. Before the McLaren thing happened, I reached out to see what he was doing next year, but then we didn't go anywhere." Steiner was also asked as to why the talks didn't progress at all, to which he replied, "I don't know, you ask him." The Italian continued to discuss Ricciardo, joking that HAAS no longer wants him now that he has crashed into Magnussen in lap 1, but then continuing to discuss the talks and emphasizing that the talks with Ricciardo would have been under a huge cloud due to his performance in McLaren. "He never spoke with me. He still doesn't speak with me, and he'd better not after last weekend when he crashed into us. So I don't answer the phone call anymore." Danny this year, obviously he didn't do well, otherwise he would still be at McLaren. So I think we have to consider that one as well. We would have known in the moment is not the height of his career. And I still don't get it because I think he is a very good driver. Because he won races with Red Bull, he was very good. And this year, it just didn't come together. So if you take somebody like this, you take the risk. Can you bring him back or not? Still, Hulkenberg has been out of the sport for 3 years, and quite frankly, he wasn't really impressive in his F1 career either. He never finished on the podium in his career, and while HAAS is unlikely to do so anytime soon, it would be far better to sign a proven race winner rather than a mediocre driver. Instead, HAAS let go of a young talent and a kid with a lot to learn in order to bring back a 35-year-old driver who sung his song in F1 a long time ago. But time will tell whether the American team made the right decision by signing Hulkenberg, and time will also tell whether Steiner was in the wrong for not pursuing Ricciardo enough. When you are a backmarker team, obviously you have to spend a little more time getting the attention of the other drivers. However, that isn't necessarily a bad thing, and had HAAS brought Ricciardo instead of Hulkenberg, it would have been a whole different story. Still, Ricciardo's future wasn't with HAAS, as he says, adding earlier this month, "I was aware there's the seat at HAAS potentially available, the seat at Williams potentially available, so it's nothing new to me. With my management team, we're trying to put together a plan I believe in that's going to set me up for success in the long term. I know I'm 33, but I look at Alonso, I look at Lewis, and if I want to be here and I still have it in my heart, then I know I can. It's really now not just looking at next year and just jumping into the first available seat. I'm trying to look a little bit beyond that and back myself to be winning races again." But what's next for Ricciardo? If he manages to secure a reserve driver deal with Red Bull, it goes without saying that he will still be in the running for racing spots, due to the fact that he practically never lost the groove in F1. On top of that, Ricciardo weighed his options in an interview with The Race, adding, "You've got to weigh it up. I know what it's been like racing in the front, and then racing in the midfield and all that. There are two ways it can go as well. There's the good scenario where I jump in another car and it's awesome. Let's say I'm back to being me. But that could also be I feel awesome, but I'm fighting for P16 and P17. And everyone knows when you're at the back, you can be doing such a kick-ass job, but if you're still getting P16, there's still just a lot of risk with that. And also, I've been doing it long enough where I'm like, I don't want to be fighting for that. And there's no guarantee next year what team is going to be fighting for what position, but at this point, and I know it's a risk, I want a bit more of a sure thing." Ricciardo's goals are clear. He wants to return to a top-performing team, and if he can't fight at the front, his ambitions will be dashed. However, the top 3 performing teams in Formula One are all but free for him, which is why he would have to seek another place on the grid, and if there is a chance for his comeback, it would likely be in the midfield or the back markers. That is probably why Ricciardo is weighing up his options, and just like Villeneuve said, a sabbatical can be good for proven champions like Alonso, Schumacher, and Raikkonen. If your last stint in F1 is like Ricciardo's, then you shouldn't expect to be a wanted asset on the grid, no matter the time when you are making the comeback decision. With that being said, it's very likely that we saw the last of the Honey Badger on the grid, and it is a shame that the sport is going to lose a driver like him. But the reality stands as it is, and it's not a good one as of now for the Honey Badger. What do you think is the next chapter for Ricciardo? Do you think he can salvage his F1 career if he accepts the reserve driver role at Red Bull? Let us know in the comments below.